It's time to come back. Yes. So welcome to come back. We just finished our very exciting session. We learn more about our members, and this is really great. And I think if you have some questions you don't have time, or you don't feel today you want to ask, keep it and make the notes. And at the last day, that means the Friday, we specially set the session, we call it open space. And at that time, at that space, you can continue to communicate with each other. So great. Now let's begin our second session. This session mainly is a build up for the students. Let us give them more attention on students. So in this event, we invited 4 distinguished students from day 1 to day 4 to share their works and have the communication directly with the students. Why we do it? Because we hope that through the dialogue, the spirit of artists can encourage and inspire our students. But also, for the return, our artists also can be stimulated by the youth energy from the students. So this is the aim of this kind of design for this program, and I hope everybody can enjoy it. Today, the moderator for this session is Deja Hira, a student from La Salle College of Arts of Singapore. So thank you, Deja. You may start this session.
All right. Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Could I get a thumbs up? All right. Thanks,
Yes,
guys.
very good.
So I'm calling in from sunny Singapore. It is, okay, not so sunny right now. It's 11 o'clock at night, but I'm so very happy to be with you guys. So a little bit about me. I am a level 2 student from La Salle College of the Arts, and I am pursuing a degree in acting, BA with honors in acting. Yeah, and before that, I was from School of the Arts Singapore, where I majored in theatre. So for myself, apart from acting, I do dance as well. So I'm very much interested in movement. I'm very fascinated and interested in physical theatre and intercultural theatre as well. And I receive opportunities to learn different forms such as Kathakali, Balinese topeng, and I want to see how I can continue to use this in my work. So being here today in this event, I'm very honored, and I'd like to extend my thanks to the network and the board for having me on board. So without further ado, I would like to invite our network board member, Daniel, who will be introducing our distinguished guest artist, Elli. Daniel, please.
Thank you very much. Great introduction. Thanks a lot. So I have the big honor to present Elli PAPAKONSTANTINOU. I love this name. I hope I said it right. She's a Greek stage director, writer, visual artist, and cultural manager. Elli, in her work, brings together myth and gender philosophy by rediscovering the classics and creating immersive experiences. She's founder of the international well-known company ODC Ensemble. She lived and worked for many years in the UK and returned during the crisis to Greece, from where she is since then leading and creating her productions. This moment of crisis and her engagement with civic movements inspired her to shape her artistic ideas. Elli has won many awards and prizes, and it's not enough time now and the right place to mention them. I hope you forgive me, Elli. She is also a very requested teacher in different universities around the globe. Let me just finish with a personal remark, because I know her work since many years. I just have a little personal description about her theater. What is the theater of Elli? So it is extremely strong, it is strange, it is very beautiful, it's dirty, it's dangerous, it's not comfortable, lots of humor, it's full of love, it's ancient and very modern, it's physical, it's universal, it's wild, but extremely precise, very magic, very expressive, and it's very special and rare to see a theater like this. So Elli, please, You are very welcome to be here with us.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you so very much for this wonderful introduction. I don't know, can you hear me well?
Yes, very well. Thanks a lot.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so very much. Thank you for the invitation. I have been a member of ITI since the beginning of my professional career. And for a woman artist like myself who lived at the periphery of Europe, ITI was the closest I could get to an international dimension of theater and exposure to different methodologies and theater traditions. So I'm very moved about this honoring invitation, and I want to thank you very much to begin with. And also Chen Shongwen for the invitation. Thank you. As you can see, of course, this is mostly to do with the students and to have an interaction with the students. I will try to keep my introduction to my work very limited. But you will see in my site that the way the work is described is that I create multidisciplinary performances across different forms of art, from music and theater to dance, visual artists, literature. Actually, quite recently, it's also been Zoom platforms and digital interaction with the audience. My special emphasis, as Daniel said, is obviously political collectivity, new media. But I will not talk about that. I will go down to the source and what is the source of my inspiration. So I have been, ever since I was a little girl, my grandmother, my parental grandmother, being a refugee from Minor Asia, instead of fairy tales narrated to me true stories from the big exodus of the Greeks from Turkey to Greece. And she intertwined this true history of hers, very violent stories of their immigration, with ancient myths and extracts from the Odyssey. I think that this beautiful amalgam of real stories and myth, history and storytelling must have shaped the way I perceive the world, since most of my work draws from the myth. To me, and I will use a text by Anne Carson, the poet. Myths are stories about people who become too big for their lives temporarily, so that they crash into other lives or brush against gods. In crisis, their souls are visible. And I want to say that this has been a very inspiring quote for me, because when I had the chance to move from Greece to the UK and then live there and work for 10 years, I came automatically in contact with a different culture that does not embrace mythology as part of their everyday understanding of the world. So a society that is more concentrated on the rational understanding of our deeds and actions as human beings on this planet. And this has been a cultural shock to begin with, but of course it's also part of who I am right now, because I've lived there for 10 years. Then the Greek crisis came. And at the time I was living in Berlin. I had moved there and I was working there. And I decided to move back to Greece in 2011, thanks to the Greek crisis. I think the crisis completely reshaped my understanding of the world. The word crisis etymologically in Greece stands for a synonym of judgment, of the word catastrophe means turn around. So the way to reflect anew on the situations, on the human level of interacting with each other. I believe the crisis has been a catalyst for change and a transition from the private to the public sphere. And in my case, it signaled a break with the present, and it gave birth to new ways of thinking and making art. And I would like to explain why that happened, just to open the floor. Of course, it's very difficult to describe everything that is happening during a crisis situation, when the whole certainties of a collective certainties collapse, or when new mythologies, because as we all know, we keep on creating new myths and new narratives. Even though, even in the most materialist cultures, I see this, and sometimes even there, it's even more important to create a collective myth. So all these certainties and the way that collectively the Greeks would think about themselves as part of the European Union, for example, or how we perceive art as being part of an industry, theater as being part of as being a product, the audience as being, a neutral. I don't really like this word, audience, because it asserts, it connects with this idea of consumer, which is like a very neutralized term to my understanding. All this kind of collapsed in Greece, the whole structure. And with it, what was a revelation was the misbeliefs and the collective public understanding of who we are, the collective consciousness behind that. So in my work, I rewrite, I restage, I revisit ancient myths, but as a way to challenge contemporary myths. Constructed misbeliefs, concrete narratives of our days. And I think that, and this was very revealing to me during the Greek crisis, it was that as people went out collectively in the streets to reclaim their culture, reclaim the possibility of thinking, imagining of themselves collectively, it kind of make more sense to also imagine and reimagine ourselves collectively. So I think that theater is the space for where we can actually be collective, very individual, in the safety of a collective that is present, but also reaffirm and empower this idea of the body of individuals that meet to imagine themselves, their potential, their future collectively. This has been an extraordinary experience for me, that people started going to the theater to give answers about their real lives. And as the crisis was deepening in Greece, so did the need to move into the area of the non-material world, the non-rational world. So people would not actually relate to the theater at that time to get answers about how their everyday life might be better, or but to relate with the unknown, to come in terms with the chaos, with the unexpected reality that is beyond our control in our everyday life. So I became increasingly interested in presenting open and polyphonic dramaturgies, more inclusive dramaturgies that do not really come up with an understanding of the world and with a certain message about it that would somehow be relevant to the richness and perplexities of our realities. As I kind of hinted before, I consider it to be a problem of our days that the art industry seeks to categorize art in order to be able to subsidize it. And theater to me is as big as the world, with all its different levels, the poetic, the metaphysical, the political, even the athletic, as the performers are athletes, the gender dimension, And the power of theater lies in acquainting us with our contradictions and perplexities of language, of thought, of actions. And this is where I see like the therapeutic character of theater. And this is what I try to do with my work. So to bring these difficult perplexities to the surface. I realized that there is also something that is not so obvious to talk about, that in times of crisis, there is also the great opportunity to reveal a collective trauma. I'm really interested in this idea of the trauma. I think that also when we speak about gender politics, for example, I'm very, very interested in gender politics, and most of my work lately is emphasizing on gender politics, or draws from there. I think that that this is what theater is, my theater tries to do, like to expose the core of the collective trauma, because the crisis is a time where things are shaped, they move very fast, and this of course reflects to the identity of the individuals and the collective. So part of my work, I've also directed a show in concentration camps. This is an ongoing project where I go to concentration camps and I work with in situ with the community and actors, and part of this work is really to address collective traumas and reveal the certainties and the new narratives that have actually concealed what really has happened and what really is happening in our societies. And sometimes this is very obvious, like obvious. It's always a secret, of course, because collectively we do, as I realized through my work, exactly what we do as individuals. So we are actually pushing away or hiding. It's like a secret, like as the researchers and the historians in all the concentration camps I've been. For example, said that since that it was in the 90s that they got their first testimonies about what was happening from the local community. So that means almost 50 years after the events. And even then, people would never talk about this. Even now, like people from the Mauthausen concentration camp, from Mauthausen, for example, where I've worked, they would say that we come from Linz. When you ask them where do they come from, they would say we come from Linz. So there is this repression that that is really interesting, and these mechanisms that are very interesting to research and understand the community where you are addressing. Of course, I'm working in different cultural environments, and every culture is different. So to work before I start directing, I need to have spent time in a place and do my own research and understand how my original idea and my perception of the myth and what I would like to open as an open dramaturgy, as open questions, how to do this, how to find the right tonality to do this, and what exactly the local community has the common secret, let's say. And the common secret is never the same. So moving from one culture to the other, some themes shift a lot, and especially when we talk about gender politics, for example, the temperatures are different, and moving from one country to the other, the understanding of the theme itself is different. What I wanted to say is that sometimes it's not as open and as prominent as in the case of Mauthausen, for example. Although it's very perplexed at the same time in Mauthausen, of course, it's very perplexed. It's not a simple situation; it never is. But it's not. But in a way, the field is visible. But there are other experiences that I've had where things are even more concealed. For example, I've just directed a show at Dramaten in the National Theatre in Sweden, in Stockholm, and working there for 2 months on gender politics. And it has been a very revealing experience, in the sense that the new myths that we are creating sometimes are so strong that it's very, very difficult to have access to for the people to actually engage. And it's always a very big challenge to engage the local actors into this process of first of all researching, and then engaging into an honest conversation with the myth, and with the collective, the people who come to see the show. I would like to say some things about how the work my work is also in relation, in connection with traditional forms and new ways, new technologies, and how does that function. I'm working a lot with music and video. I think music is a vehicle that connects us directly with the origins of the myth and the collective trauma as well. Like, it's a way to move beyond the understand language in a different way, I guess. Language not as a tool of information, but language as a becoming of its own possibility, and the becoming of a new collective of the audience, like a language that is also open to interaction with the audience, but in itself it's not closing down its meanings and its for that reason, I have been working on pieces that are multilinguistic as well. In a way, this is my way to sometimes dissociate the meaning from the language and reconnect it with resonance, which, from where I come from, resonance is a way to connect and to convey knowledge that, in a way, transcends the local and the very timely update information about our world. So in that sense, language and music, or a musical way to address language, is a way for me to connect to the myth and what myth does. That it opens us up to the impossible, the known unknown world, our becoming, our future, and our past, and our possible present. So I would like at this point to maybe show, if possible, I could ask Annalie to show a small extract from The Cave. That was, it's a trailer from a show that was based on the allegory of the cave, the Platonic allegory of the cave. Here I focused on fake news. That was one of the references. I usually start my methodology having 2-3 references, and I work around the myth, but having also references about different topics that could connect with each other in free associations. So here I focused on truth, because the allegory of the cave by Plato and Plato is opening this very big question about truth embedded in all of us, or a transcendental understanding of truth, a human global understanding of what is truth and what is not truth. and fake news in our times, and the difficulty of accessing the real information in our days. And as you will see, music and visuals were all created live on stage. This is how I work most of the times with live media and live video and live music. And the piece is pop in its visualization, but we worked with shadow puppeteers to create it, combining traditional instruments as well with shadow traditions, but also new technologies and new media. So I think it's a good example, and then we can continue.
The allegory of the cave. Republic 514A2 to 517A7. Part 1. The Cave.
φαντάσου αυτό.
Imagine people live the earth in a
Thank you. It's a very short clip, and I will keep on giving some more insight into my work, just to make this less boring. But I wanted to go back into the empowerment, the collective empowerment that theater can give, as opposed to our individualistic societies. And this has been a great interest of mine to see how revealing the pandemic has been, and our reflexes toward the pandemic. I mean, the reflexes of the theater industry and the theater people toward the pandemic. Being Greek and knowing how important it is, especially during the crisis, the moments of crisis, for connection and for keeping this public sphere ongoing, this public platform of dialogue on what is art, how can we, what formats can we create to connect with each other. The pandemic has opened a new possibility. It happened by chance. I was at the time working on Antigone rehearsing in real life, but then the pandemic came, so we continue working in Zoom. And it somehow opened a new possibility. And it made me think, what if we have kind of, because of the division between art world and corporate world, art being the world that comes with its own structures and its own languages, its own ways of making theater or any kind of art, and the corporate world coming in a very, very aggressive, fast way, swapping everything away in its way, we have kind of moved backwards in our connection with technology. And for me, theater has always been connected to technology. Like if we think about the Renaissance theater, it's all about the machinery. It has always been about that since its origins. And even in the antiquity, it has been about the technology as well. We have machines in ancient Greek theaters that serve the narrative. And the important thing is what really would serve the narrative. So I was thinking about this corporate world and what happens and with it. And I then had this idea to why not use the Zoom platform as a platform for public art, for public dialogue. What will that create? And so I will. We moved on, and we created. I created this piece that is called Antigone. It started from the digital world because of the circumstances, but then because I do explore different formats, and has always been part of the work, and like trying different formats, trying different way. How can I tell the story, and how can I move and really, shape the way according to the content and the time that this dialogue takes place. I then started thinking that maybe this is a possibility. So I will now share with you four different short extracts. I would start with Antigone, since I talked about that. So that would be video 4, and this is Traces of Antigone. As you will see, there are two in the trailer. There are two different versions in the same trailer. So there is the physical version, because then after creating the digital, then we had some windows to present the work in festivals. So it's been like, as the whole industry has been upside down, but we did manage to present it physically. So it was also a very interesting kind of movement and method, like moving from the digital world into the physical world, but creating an in-between space where we would invite both physical and digital audiences to observe, to be part of a show that was different for both of them. So in a way it was creating a third space, a space where the digital audience would see something that they knew that the physical audience would see something else, and then the physical audience knew that while they were watching that the digital audience would see something else, and distancing also for me was somehow interesting, this playfulness with the formats. So if it's okay with Anna-Lee, maybe we can see video 4, please.
With a heart that is distressed, but every bird who's wise will build herself a nest. She looked at me and sighed, then a miracle occurred. The little weaver bird got weaving.
Biologie, biology, biologia.
Ακούει για ταξιτζίδες, ακούει για δασκάλους, ακούει για πατεράδες πατριούς, ακούει για γνωστούς άνδρες, άνδρες στις παραλίες, άνδρες στα εμπορικά κέντρα, άνδρες νηπιαγωγούς, ακούει για άνδρες στον παιδικό σταθμό, φίλους μεγάλων αδερφών, για δάσκαλους οδήγησης, διευθυντές σχολείων, άνδρες κοινωνικούς λειτουργούς. Μαθαίνει να φοβάται, μαθαίνει να προφυλάσσεται, μαθαίνει να προβλέπει, να φαντάζεται, να σκέφτεται αφηρημένα, να σκέφτεται την αιτία και το αποτέλεσμα. Ξέρει να προσέχει, ξέρει τι μπορεί να συμβεί, ξέρει τι θα πει φόβος, ξέρει πως αποτελεί πιθανό στόχο. She knows how to protect herself, she knows how not to give the wrong impression, she knows how to take responsibility, she knows how to change her way. She knows that her sister got lost, she disappeared, though no one knows what happened to her.
Maybe she was sacrificed to the gods. She knows that. Her sister, herself, any girl. It happens. Sooner or later, it happens. One day they run along the olive grove, the next day they are gone. And no mother, no father can prevent it. No brother. She knows what everyone else knows so often that it becomes a cause of fear. She knows that time is the difference, that her sister is innocent, just like herself, that it's most probably just a matter of time.
Προσέχει, κινείται με στόχο. Σκέφτεται τη βία, τη σεξουαλική βία, την τρέμει, την περιμένει.
She's a girl. We can't use a neutral word. In her case, it's too late. She's been brought up as a girl. She, a child, dark-skinned, neutral.
Rape is not a word, it's images made of your own flesh. It's the knowledge of evil, of ugly intentions. I'm not making this up, this is knowledge. So important that it was taught to her since she started going to school on her own. She is caught by threats. They teach her something, and that which they teach her is not ephemeral. It's not abstract knowledge, something that could happen in this world.
Thank you. So I think now we've talked enough and and showed enough. Maybe we can go into the dialogue that I'm so looking forward to.
All right. Wow. Thank you so much, Ali, for that very inspiring sharing. And I actually had some questions prepared, but I think in your sharing, you very beautifully answered a lot of it. So I'm maybe just gonna start out with a reflection based on what you shared. So talking about the myth, I think that's very interesting to me because personally, the work that I'm interested in also has to do with mythology, specifically with mythology in Singapore and the Malay archipelago. So some of plays that I've seen here that I've really enjoyed actually have used myths from this region, the Malay archipelago, to deal with modern narratives such as modernization, globalization, eradication of culture, eradication of our roots, and yeah, hearing that the work you are of the work you're doing is very inspiring to know that across the globe there's this parallel, there's this mirror that's going on. And I was just quite interested in what you mentioned about using myths to challenge new narratives or new myths. So I'm interested in the term new myth because from what I know of myth, a myth has to do something with the mystical, a legend. So when you're referring to a new myth or a newly constructed myth, what does that mean to you?
Yes, thank you so much for this wonderful question. First of all, I'd like to share that from my experience, it's of course we don't share the same experience and the same relation to myth, but maybe we share an understanding of colonialism that is interesting. And the ancient myths have been the basis of the European culture in a way. So they have been embedded in the European culture. I guess this is a difference when it comes to the archipelago mythologies. But at the same time, it's really interesting that we have imported our mythology and our understanding of our culture through the European perspective. So there is a reappropriation there that is extremely interesting. But anyway, I'm just saying this as a comment, but I can move on to the real question, which is, what is a new mythology? I think that human beings are creating collective stories unconsciously, and there is a consensus on some things, like an understanding on ethnic, for example, on ethnic similarities or ethnic points that distinguish us from other ethnicities. There is, for example, I can give you an example about that, which might be more concrete. Now that I worked in Sweden, for example, and I was working on the ancient myth of Alcestis, and working on gender politics in Sweden. And Sweden, I think, from my understanding, Swedish people have an understanding that they live in a perfect country that takes care of them, and that gender politics have been regulated since the 80s, long before, but the 80s is like a moment for them that they refer to. So what does that, how can I engage? What does this myth tell today? And how can I use this myth to engage with this new mythology that is created, is what is taken for standard, let's say. If you ask an average person in the street in Sweden, they will say, well, we have regulated our political correctness, has been here. We live in the second wave of the Me Too now. We are a very advanced society, and it's true, of course, that in terms of politics, it's there. But what happens with human beings? How does the psychic, how does the identity, where does the trauma go? And having long conversations with Swedish people, I realized that there is so much trauma in political correctness that I wanted to address, and that there is no space to address publicly because of this new mythology that everything is so perfect here. We have regulated. So regulating within this consensus is also a way to conceal the agony. We are afraid as human beings, like, what are we becoming? And that is what is fear is in collective trauma as well, and this is why we regulate things in our society. So going into the this is the crisis, like, well, this is the where the walls break, going into the break, and how to create this, how to find the right tonality, also to discuss about the things that people do not want to talk about in their publicly. And usually new mythologies are connected to things that we don't want to discuss.
Great. Thank you so much for that really enriching answer. Concealing the agony. I think it's a very interesting notion. I think there's something you brought up earlier as well. Theaters as big as the world. I just thought, that I think this very event is a testament to that statement. And branching out from there, I would like to open up the dialogue to others who may have questions, be it students or educators. You may type it in chat, or if you would like to just turn on your mic and feel free to ask. So is there anyone that has any questions?
I would have a question, but maybe later. Maybe first the student would like to ask something. I can wait also, maybe. But I would have one question.
Sure. All right, you are first on the queue. All right, let's see. Are there any students here who have any questions, or anyone? Let me just check is there any hands raised? Okay, well, if there isn't, Daniel, would you like to take question, or would you like me to?
No, I can do my question. Thanks a lot. Sorry, how do you say your name? Tejas?
Oh yes, it's Tejas, like
Tejas.
contagious. Yes.
Okay, thanks, Tejas. Sorry. So my question is, in your talk, Ellie, I never heard the word catharsis. And I was just wondering if you don't want to use this word, if it's a decision of yours to not use it, because it's so obvious and maybe so simple to think, okay, we talk about trauma, collective trauma, and I do this work and it brings you to catharsis. It's too simple, I know, but that was my imagination.
No, thank you for asking this. I deliberately do not use this. Of course, I use like that there is some kind of collective, I think, moving on, but is the words I use or some kind of therapeutical aspect in theater when we address our taboos. But yes, I totally agree with you. I just don't want to put so much big words on the table. But of course, this is part of how and why I do theater, is to go in these areas of risk, and do this in ways that my audience might also like to go there, which I don't take for granted. And yes, of course, catharsis is a very important notion, but you know, it's not really in my vocabulary in that sense. But thank you for asking. Of course, I just, you know, because of the mythology, and of course the notions of the Greek tragedy are always in my mind, and why we do theater and why it all started in Greece. There are some similarities there, of course, with my contemporary work, like with my main focus and direction. It's that our society is still becoming. It's in a creative becoming. So nothing is put in stone, and we are here to reflect and raise questions and reflect on the dark parts of not and our decisions. Yes, our consensus can also hide some dark areas, even though we think that everything has been regulated.
All right. Thank you so much, Daniel, for that question. I believe, sorry, Pavlos, I see your hands raised. I think earlier I missed out. Lars, is that how am I pronouncing your name correctly? I believe you were raising your hands. So
Yes,
yeah, would you
no
like to ask your
worries.
questions first, and then after that we can go on to Pavlos?
Thank you, Tejas.
No worries.
So thank you, Ellie, for that very wonderful presentation. So you've mentioned how coming from the peripheries in Greek in Europe influenced the kind of politics that is ultimately reflected in the kind of art you make. For example, on gender politics in the current project you are doing in about concentration camps. And I personally resonate with this coming as a student from the Philippines, with our post-colonial identity, and how also you've mentioned the word crisis a lot of times. And now in the pandemic revealed how theater as an industry, as an art form, was deemed non-essential in comparison to other needs globally, since very tactile, our art is the most tactile of all forms. And it was seen how Broadway was closed, or how we all migrated online in our theater productions. So I suppose my question would be, as we return in our theater venues and spaces, what, in your opinion, how can the theater community, our community, reinstate its stake in the world? And is it by amplifying the politics, or accentuating it more? Since the general world, the general public, sees the theater community as very frivolous and glamorous. So do we maintain our stake, our to transcend, I guess, our ephemerality? by being more political in our work, like combating fake news, combating like discrimination in this increasingly broken world of ours. So you have examples a while ago from Daniel, for example, about the work on refugee camps, about refugee camps in Switzerland, or like Billy about militant drama in Sudan. So that was a very convoluted thought process, but I hope my question was there. Thank you very much.
Yes, and thank you so much. It's a great comment and question at the same time about our world, and I do understand the corporate aspect of the theater was that what seized, but not the importance of theater. I think on the contrary, like what was very revealing during the pandemic was that yes, theater industry closed down, but yet at the same time, the need for communication and for um, public platforms where we could actually exchange political dialogue about human rights or that, and connect with the myth and the uncertainty of the times, that was so revealing, like something that our certainties were completely swapped away. And what is the space where we can actually empower ourselves collectively? The only place where that can happen is theater. It's not even cinema. I mean, we do go collectively to watch a film, even though we live stream, download film cinema nowadays in our individual spaces, our private spaces. That is gone. The only space where we can actually meet and reflect collectively and in present moment and let art do things in our body in real time. It's only theater. And I think this is a very important platform. Maybe it's also political demonstrations. Maybe it's also, but it has, to me, it has, to my understanding, it would be phenomenal if we could demonstrate in a more artful way, not in a more surreal way, in that sense. Like if art can actually take over public space out there in real cities, that would be the equivalent. But since this is not possible in the public space, most of the times it's not possible, then theater is the space to do that. So I don't know if I answered your question, but for me, it's on the opposite. Like I think that it has really, I have this very strong idea about what the pandemic really opened, this need.
Yes, thank you very much. That's very beautiful. It's a reminder how our politics really is embedded in our aesthetics in our community. So thank you very much, Ellie.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much, Lars, for that really thought-provoking question. Right. Moving on next. I believe we had Pavlos who had his hand raised. So
Yes.
over to you, Pavlos.
Hello. Uh, it is so. It's such a pleasure to see Ellie on the window in a global context, and it makes a great. It's a contradiction in terms and in experience. Having had so many discussions with her, embodied discussions in our neighborhood in central Athens, and now in a different context we are discussing by focusing on a theme which is first of all quite anthropological. I am a cultural anthropologist. I introduced myself earlier, and we anthropologists have studied myths systematically. So we in anthropology take myth to be an archetypal condensation of a collective view of humanity. Uh, Therefore, the truth value of a myth, the importance, the significance of a mythical discourse as a true discourse. Now, we also know, and drawing from our tradition, the ancient Greek tradition, that myths were interpreted. And interpretation is the act attributed to Hermes, the hermeneutics, the art of interpreting. So interpretation implies different versions of the truth. Hence, the interpretative context may serve very well an artist who wants to establish her work through a myth. But here is the question coming from an anthropological point of view, and maybe can inspire artists, theater people in particular. We make this distinction in anthropology between primitive myths and political myths. Primitive myths cannot violate what collective truth is all about. Political myths, you have to begin with fake stories and then go for the reality, hidden in the political myth. So my question, observation, food for discussion is this: how can a myth in its archetypal, primitive conceptualization communicate, flow together with the political aspect of maybe contemporary myths, and also interpretations flowing between the primitive and the political myth, between truth as a realized truth and truth as projected to cover ideas, approaches, okay, serving an elite and its purposes. There.
Thank you so much, Pavlo, for this, and it's so great to see you here. Also, for me, it's it's a surprise, a good one. So I think the ancient Greeks answered your question better than I do. I mean, in the sense that there were also the Greek tragedies are pulling, are drawing from the great sea of the myth, of the primitive myth, but we shouldn't forget, I mean, there's certainly something that I don't forget, that those who wrote, the writers, the playwrights of these tragedies were men who were addressing other men within a patriarchal society, and they were using the myth to educate. So within a political system and within specific political parameters. So the mythological, the primitive mythology and the myths and the political myths intertwined since the very genesis of the Greek tragedy. And this is the way that I think for us working on the myths, this is our primary mechanism of intertwining both and reflecting both to each other. So I think it's in a creative dialogue of both plateaus, let's say, the ongoing timely plateau. Let's talk about another political myth, which could be not patriarchy. As I mentioned before, the patriarchal structures are a narrative, a myth of our days that is now falling apart or is being challenged. But what happens with capitalism, for example? Is there such a political myth that challenges, that could be challenged? The idea of structures carrying the dreams of becoming whoever you want to be. So, or of structures revealing the truth, that we now have access to all possible knowledge that we had no, that's another political myth of our times. How does that reflect? It's a very big question, like how to do this in modern terms, how to draw from the depth of the primitive myth, as you mentioned before, and so that everyone could reflect on it, know that it comes from a big source, a source that is speaks to everyone's hearts. but at the same time, how to create an open dialogue with what happens today. Well, I think my personal answer is I don't know if I have a very persuasive answer, but I'm always trying to create associations in the audience's minds, rather than feed in a specific message. You know, that this is how I'm working with the myth. And it depends on how prominent I would like this diversion to be from the political myth, from the how big the diversion should be in order for this piece to. It depends on how big the resistance is in the audience, in what I perceive from the cultural context, because you know, there are some communities that are pretty much very available to discuss and talk and to engage, but then sometimes it's not easy. So then it depends on that resistance and how far you want to go with the political and the. I don't know if I answered your question, but it was really interesting, and thank you.
It's a big topic. Okay, we can continue our conversation when you are around in the neighborhood.
Yes.
Right. Thank you very much, Pavlos, for that question, for that anthropological perspective, I might add. I was a student of anthropology, so I have a deep love for the subject. And yeah, I thought what you mentioned about interpretation and different versions of the truth is very interesting. I strongly believe that as data practitioners, you know, we are interpretive artists, constantly providing different versions of you know, quote unquote, the truth. Yeah, with that, at this juncture, I would like to ask Ellie if she would like to play the other videos that you had, the other media you had prepared, and then we can continue the Q&A dialogue after.
Yes, of course, we could try Alcestis, since I already talked about Alcestis in the Dramaten piece. I just come back from Sweden, so yeah, let's try that.
Okay, excellent. Let's have a look.
The format is wrong, so you could only see extra, very zoomed in parts of it. Shall we maybe try Oedipus, because this didn't work? Thank you.
Sure, let's take a
Or
look
if you
at
would like
Oedipus.
to, yes, thank you.
I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and imagine that you're sitting in front of a mirror.
That was a sharing of Oedipus. Sex with mom was blinding. Would you like to provide some comments first, Ellie?
Yes, well, obviously it's about identity. So for this piece, there was I collaborated with an academic psychoanalyst who was on stage, also experimenting with the audience on their perception of themselves. And the idea was to actually raise the question of identity, but in a more interactive and playful way, and involve the audience. I have done a long research at Stanford University. I was there with a Fulbright award to work with brain scientists, and as part of my research to understand what, to get feedback also for the writing of this work. And that has been a very revealing period also for me, like to understand, to see how the American scientists are treating how do they think about the identity? Are we children of chance? What happens with the brains? Because the brain scientists do have a different idea, a different understanding of not of identity, but of the decisions and the choices, and how random our choices are. So it's been really interesting to incorporate some of this research into the final text of the show, the libretto. Of course, it's live music, as you probably saw. And maybe I could also show Hotel Anti-Oedipus, which is the digital, so that took place during the pandemic, the Hotel Anti-Oedipus. And we reworked on some of the material of Oedipus Sex with Mom Was Blinding. And I could, if that's okay, I could show a small extract of an in situ composition where the audience was actually asked to contribute into the composition itself as the choir, the chorus of this Oedipus play in real time.
All alone in our rooms, we are now more than ever interconnected in this global agora. Citizens of the net, citizens of the platforms, citizens of loneliness. What is the sound we make if we listen from a distance?
I have another challenge for you. Please, unmute yourselves, open your cameras. All 89 of us from different parts of the globe are all logged into the same Zoom. Let's create the soundscape of one city. Speak from the heart. Share a story about our plague, or read the subtitles and become the choir of the Oedipus plague.
Ancora una procedura.
People dying. Immense numbers. Government that refuses to do anything about it.
Еще СМС не получил. Еще СМС.
Terror, terror.
Like it's a debate.
I cry out.
There's suffering out there.
Out there in a zombie of the river of the Sphinx.
People dying out there.
There are people dying out there.
People dying out there.
People dying out there.
People dying out there.
Will you do it again?
Yes. Do it again?
So you do it again?
Why?
E invece no, io chiusa qui in questa fottuta stanza senza incontrare nessuno e qualcuno che cazzo parli italiano.
Perioda.
Mi capite quello che dico? Io vorrei raccontare la mia storia a qualcuno, non c'è un cazzo di nessuno con cui parlare.
L'uomo, io dico
C'è qualcuno con puoi parlare?
Io ti capisco.
Poi piano. C'è qualcuno?
Here I am, myself. You all know me. The world knows my fame. I am Oedipus, the man who solved the riddle of the Sphinx, the riddle of the reptiles. You are sick to death, but no one is sick as I have wept
Sex with mama's divine. Mama, sex with mom was blinding.
Right. That was a beautiful cacophony.
Exactly. Yes.
Right.
I very much see the art as a release, like something that can release some tension. Huh?
Exactly, yeah. Actually, what you played reminds me of a recent activity that I had with my school. It was a telematic event where we collaborated with a school from Zurich and Japan, and we had different artists on Zoom where we were jamming, and there were different languages, there were different mediums, art, visual art, media, and yeah, there was, even though there was no fixed narrative that we were going for, there was a sense of artistic release and music, and in the context of this pandemic, us being online. Yeah. So yeah, watching that
It is
was really
wonderful
inspiring.
to explore and keep on trying, especially when everything falls down. I think that this is where there's this urgent need to keep on creating. That is
Exactly.
so.
Yeah, a lot of beauty emerges from crisis. Yeah. So going on, I would like to open up the floor to anyone else who has any questions. Let me just take a scan through the different galleries. Do we have any? Feel free to just type in the questions or raise your hand. Okay. Right, seems like there are no questions from the floor now, but maybe I could offer one question to Ellie. So from the past few videos that you have played for us, one thing I've noticed is there was a lot of maybe I make this my my closing question. So you talk a lot about using technology and interacting with myths, and you say that this is not this is not necessarily a new convention, because in ancient Greek there were mechanics, there were machines that were being used, but in a contemporary context, using multimedia and all these new emerging technologies, how has the response been from people in Greece towards this this blending of Greek mythologies and the medium of contemporary technologies?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to open my mic. So I think there are different generations, of course, and it's a generation border at the same time. So I think that the younger generations are so much affected by different speed of information moving through the social media or streaming movies, or everything is accessible to them. And at the same time, this is not actually uh, providing an end, like going into a theater where something is transformed into something else because it's not used in the usual way, is something that can surprise the audience, the younger audience. I think there's this element of surprise. I think there is an element of surprise for all generations for different reasons, and for me, this is surprise is a useful tool, as long as it's not done for the sake of it, but it's a tool to tell a story in such a way that you can use one can use this as in parallel with the text or with music or different means that get together. I've always worked all my different mediums in parallel. So it's not that I develop the research for the new technologies separately and then develop it becomes part of the language. So it's a net that is, but many artists are using new media nowadays. So I cannot answer this scientifically, I guess, but it's an interesting topic. I think it's an academic topic to research and see, as for someone to really see within different cultural contexts as well, what is the use of new technologies and the acceptance or non-acceptance, or how does new technologies work with and of course we have to, I am very aware of the fact that I don't even know if this is theater. Like, speaking about the digital performances, there were live performances, of course, and the audience was live. It had this live interaction, which made it live and ephemeral. And yes, there's this recording, but it's ephemeral. It's another experience. And somehow it became like an animal of the web, like a living creature, where the performers, though they were in different countries, they needed to coordinate in order to be able to synchronize, and the music was live and everything was live. So it was really, there were some elements that reminded of the frame of the theater, like entering the frame of the theater. So there were some elements, but and one might say that also the globality, like the representation of people coming from different countries to create a new audience, that a global audience, like to have in the same show people coming from Japan or Sweden or India or the US, that would have been an impossible task for any performance, a physical performance. But of course, I mean, I'm also personally, I'm moving beyond the question, is this theater, is it not? It's some expression of art, some artistic, some activity of connecting with people on a specific theme and working. And I don't really know. I cannot go into this, of course, this question. And in a lot of humbleness, I'm not even worried if this is what it is. I leave this to other people to describe what this is. And how far can we move into new formats? Are we ready to move into new formats or not? This is I think it is a question of our times as well. And how far can or will the new language serve the content, or is it serving itself because it's something new? And and how relevant is it to a real situation, a real condition of human beings, of our societies also, this language. And then I think for every artist, it is a question, like for every work, every different piece, to challenge oneself as well. How far can we go with, or are we repeating ourselves, or to which extent can we create new languages while working on, keep on working on our art? So I don't really know the answer to these questions.
No, I think you definitely really added a really great perspective. I think moving forward, the next 10 years, it'll be very interesting to see the recontextualization and creation of new languages of theater, and seeing it emerge in your work is well, it's really interesting. And yeah, and definitely you've really added a lot of new perspectives to me today. Okay, I believe we have time for one last question. I believe Paulo had a question.
Yeah, do we have time for that?
Let me check. Do we have time for one last question? Can I just check with the...
Okay, let's ask for Fini for the last question. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Thank you. Kalimera, Elli. I'm Paulo from Brazil, and I am curious about one thing. It seems to me that all your works are very related to the fact that you are a woman director and you are Greek. The rework of myths and all the discussion you had with Pavlos before. How did the critics relate to your work along your career? Did they give more emphasis on your womanness as a female director, relating to all this patriarchality you commented about the first Greek playwrights in educating the audience, or your Greekness as someone coming from the border of Europe and all the events we followed some years ago, and they are still going on? I'm very curious about how did the critics relate to your work as a Greek woman and director? Thank you.
No, I thank you for this wonderful question. I guess it's shifted along during the decades, like of working. It shifted from during the Greek crisis of the artists from the periphery, this exotic place in Europe that is, and of course it's a reality that to a certain degree. There was this kind of exoticism, like let us now have this exotic fruit to tell us what the crisis situation, but then I think gradually it also has to do with the content itself. So if like now my last works have been mostly focusing on gender and feminism and gender, so I think more and more it's about me being a woman from the periphery of Greece. So that's a secondary narrative. So it's really interesting to also see how narratives in terms of the industry itself, how these mythologies, let's say, or the narratives, or how the products could be, art as a product could serve a programming a program that is open enough to the periphery, or so it's really interesting to see how the work is being depicted. And thank you for asking this question. For me, it's also like a becoming as well of how growing with my work, and then seeing different labels at times attached. And I think because of Me Too, of course, that the label of, because I've been working on the gender since 2000, but it was never there. It was never there. When I worked on Traces of Antigone on the physical rehearsals, that was before the Greek Me Too, our social public relations person said, who was a woman, it's not possible to say that you're that this is a feminist work. So it was like excluded from our vocabulary in Greece. The moment you say this, you're nowhere. We have to be very careful on how you're going to brand the work. So it's really interesting to see these agendas that are there, and this it gradually changes. It's always changes and always shifting, and I guess it's interesting. Also, the questions like, to which extent do you serve a greater idea? You know, how
I was curious because, sorry.
No, sorry. Please go ahead.
I was curious because all the works you presented here came from these Greeks. You know, it was Plato, and then Oedipus, and then Alcestis. And you have worked with Cain and Helena Penga and other female playwrights. And I was just wondering, but Evharisto.
No, thank you so much for asking. It's always been there, but it's never, ever, until this last 2 years, it's never been approached in that sense. And that is also very interesting on, you know, how we use language and terms. And I think that the fact that we are now moving on to other areas, that we can actually dare to name a piece as, or even use the, like it's in fashion somehow, you know. So it's for me, it's also very interesting how to still contain like my values and my understanding of what I'm doing without shifting because of, you know, where things go. But it's really interesting because in a way I'm like rediscovering myself.
All right. Thank you so much, Paulo, for that question. And with that, I would like to bring this dialogue to a close. I'd like to thank Elli very much for your time and for this very extensive and meaningful sharing. I think I took away a lot today. As an aspiring practitioner, I think one main thing I took away today is to keep challenging myself and to find new languages. So thank you for sharing with me and for inspiring me, Elli. And
thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
It's been wonderful.
Thank you, everyone. And
thank
thank you, Tejas. You are really do a good job. And thanks, Elli. We had a very, very, how to say, interesting, deep, complex, and needs a lot of reflection for this talk. So it's great. Thank you very much. Thanks for the good question. Thank all your participation. And let's continue our journey. And tomorrow, I'm waiting all of you to join again. Thank you. And the good news is we are going to put this recorder on our website. So if you wish to watch it again, personally, I will do it for sure. Welcome to visit the website. Thank you, Elli. And thank you, Tejas. And thanks, everybody. Good night.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paulo, for your last question.
Yeah,
I feel it's good. I'll give you more time. Thank you. Bye-bye.